Janet and welcome to my channel. Today is video number 4 of my Christmas journal set made with Art Impressions products. This is the journal cover, and inside I'm going to show you what we've done so far. First page has a little card that we tuck in here for notes or journaling. The second page is a snowman with the sleigh full of presents. The third is a little tag. The fourth is the mailbox, and these are the 2 pages plus one more that I'm going to get done for you today. So let's take a look at the pieces we're going to need to make the pages. First of all, of course, we're working with the Watercolor Journal's die set. This is very extensive. It has all the parts and pieces needed to make the journal, to decorate it, the sentiment strips, everything. And then we've got 2 stamp sets with this cute gingerbread house and the gingerbreads, and several icons from the Holiday Mansion set, and then finally the new Christmas sentiment set. And all these products are part of the Art Impressions catalog. Some are newer, some are older, but they're all found there. Now I'm going to be using contour ink today from Hero Arts, and I've already stamped on Express It paper the images that I'm going to be using. As you can see, the images are really light. They are very light gray, and this allows us to create what is called no line coloring. It looks like it was organically drawn because you can't see the lines of the stamp. And you can use this technique with watercolor and Copic markers and really any coloring technique. Alright, so I'm going to start this off by doing the lightest colors. I like to do the light colors first, and it's really because of what I've learned over time. I found that when I did the darker colors first and then came in with the lighter up to it, sometimes the lighter would pull the darker color into the area where the light color is supposed to be. And so that doesn't look so good, especially think about doing faces, for example, where you're coloring the flesh tone in and you're butting up against, say, a purple shirt, and that purple starts pulling into where the skin tone is. That is not a good look, and it isn't what you want. So I've just learned that I prefer to use the lightest colors and then work to the darker colors in my image. Now this is like a gingerbread cottage, so the white is supposed to simulate snow, but also it's simulating like white icing. And for this I'm using C1 as the darker gray and then C0 to blend it out a little bit. So now I'm going to take the darkest of the colors. This is E37, it's a dark brown, and I'm going to use this for the accents and the darker areas of the house. The windows are going to be cut out from the die. They're going to cut out like a window pane style window, so that's why I'm just coloring it in solidly in brown, and the die will take care of making the frame of the windows when it cuts it. And now I'm going to take out E33. This is kind of the mid-tone of all the colors that I'm using on the gingerbread house. And it's going to go on the top piece of the house and in the lower section of the house. And now I'm going to take the lightest tone and I'm going to do the middle section of the house. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to come back with the E33 and draw like squiggly lines going down from the top to the bottom, and that's going to look like a little bit like icing on the cookie. And this is something that I'm taking from the package because the package shows something similar to that. So I'm going to let this go and you can see that being done. I will mention here I'm using the darkest color again because this section of the house is farthest away from the front and it's going to automatically look darker. So that's what I'm doing here, is filling that in and trying to make it appear a bit farther away from the front and therefore a bit more shaded. Alright, now I'm going to work on the chimney. I wanted a little darker color for the chimney, maybe even a little bit more orangey in appearance. So I used R35 for the main color, and then I'm going back with R59 to do some of the shading and putting in a little more of the detail back with the brick in that chimney. Okay, so now I'm working on the door, and of course I wanted a red door for this. And so I'm sticking with the two reds that I've been using throughout this video tutorial series. It's R29 for the darker color and R24 for the slightly lighter color. And I just am using that R29 first to do most of the outlining and then some shading, and then coming back with the R24 to blend it all in, and then I'll add again a little bit more of the detail back with the darker color. And now I'm going to work on the two gingerbreads that I'm going to use on this page with the gingerbread house. And this is E31 that I'm using to fill in most of the color of the gingerbread. I don't know about you guys, but I love gingers. They are really fun and they're just so sweet for Christmas. Now, as you might notice, I started to try to leave a little bit of the trim, the white trim on the hands and the feet that are in the drawing, but it's just so little that I decided pretty quickly just to forget that. I'm going to put the white back in with the Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white. It'll be a lot easier to do it that way. And then I'm going to use my trusty R29 and R24 to work on the bow tie for the boy, and then I'll use that also on the bow for the little girl. Then I'm going to come back with some twin tone chocolate and put in the details for the face. And finally, I'm going to use the little bit darker E33 to outline the gingerbread and give them a little more definition. And I'll do the same basic technique for the little girl. So I'm thinking this is really going to be cute when I get these cut out. And now the set that I used for this does come with matching dies, so it's going to be very easy and quick to cut this out. I'm going to use my Spellbinder's Best Ever Craft tape. I think that's how it goes. Anyway, that will help me secure the die in place while I run it through the cutter and make sure that I get a nice, good, even cut around each of these figures and the house itself. So here are all the pieces cut out. I decided I didn't really care for the white outline, so I'm making a little more work for myself, I guess, but I'm taking the colors, the darker colors that I used for the outlining and the shading in each of these figures, and I'm just going around the edges of the figure to get rid of the white. So it's just further defining the edges of the little character or the house. And you'll see that I'm doing a very similar thing with the house with the grays and the browns when we get to that area. This is completely optional, of course. You could just put it on with the white border. It probably would be fine. I just didn't like it this particular day when I was working on it. And I see it when it's done in my book, and I do like it with the solid line around it, just a little more definition in the various colors. But that's, again, total personal preference. So as you can see, I have now outlined the whole entire house. All I have left to do is the outline of the chimney, and for that I'm using the darker color I used in the chimney, which is the R59. So here's where I'm coming back with the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and I'm going to put in the little swirly marks on the arms and the legs of our little gingers. And this represents, of course, the white icing that you often see in a ginger as the decoration. Sometimes you see it on the heads as well. But in this case, it was in the drawing on the feet and the hands, and I'm just putting that back in. I want to add a little bit of color to these faces. There's just such sweet little faces, but I'm adding R20 and just dabbing it in on the cheeks. I put in 2 layers of it so it would stand out a little bit more in the brown. Next, I've got these pieces in my spray box, and I'm using glitter dust from Thermoweb. And this is my extra special tip for making any kind of gingerbread figure look like it's really been baked. The whole piece gets a nice sugary look to it, but also there's something about the spray itself. It sort of just deepens the brown colors, and it makes it look even more like they were baked. Okay, so now I'm going to make a background for the gingerbread house, and this is the frame from the die set for the journal. And I'm just going to put in a little bit of B00 and just kind of randomly swirl it in here. No plan really, just trying to see if that will show up behind the house, and it looks pretty good there. Then I'm going to take the B000 and I'm going to further feather out the edges of this because it's a little harsh right now. And what we're trying to do again is create a little bit of a faux watercolor background, and this helps achieve that. And I know this looks really rough right now, but it dries nice and soft. The edges will feather out, and it actually is a nice look. So you'll see that in the picture and also as I'm working on it a little later in this video. Now I'm going to make some gumdrops. In the gingerbread cubby set, there are 6 gumdrop pieces in the die set. And so I'm going to run this through my little mini cutter. I picked 6 different glitter colors to run that through with. And I'm actually going to make, in the end, 4 of each color just to make sure I have plenty to work with. But these are just tiny, tiny little gumdrops. They're so cute, you guys. But I love the fact you can get them in different colors this way, and then you can start applying them to your house. The house is great the way it is, But of course, we're used to seeing gingerbread houses with a little candy on it, and so this does the trick for that. And the hardest part maybe about it is just making sure that you figure out the bottom and the top of each gumdrop, because they're so small, but they're so perfect on this little house. It's just a great little touch to the whole piece. So I'll let you watch me attach that. First I go down the side of the house, and again I kind of followed the packaging to show how they did that. And then once I got to the end, we switched to the side of the house toward the bottom of the roof. And then on the left side of the house, I'm putting in the last little gumdrops there. And then on the top of the house, we've got 3 gumdrops on the right side, and I'm going to add one more at the top of the house. These gumdrops really finish the house off, gives it just the right amount of embellishment. I love it with these on there. I thought it would be fun to have the little girl gingerbread coming out the door of the house, so I just put a little bit of glue on her left arm and leg and stuck it behind the door of the house. And then I'm going to put the little boy in also next to her in the other window. And I just placed him inside the window, and then I'll know exactly where to put the glue to stick him in. And that's all I'm really going to do to get him to stay temporarily inside that window. Then when I glue the whole thing onto the background, of course I will glue in the back of the gingerbread boy, and then he'll be definitely stuck there. I thought it would look better if there was something in these open windows, so I used a pencil to trace that, and then I'm going back with E31 and just covering up that area. And I'm not paying attention to the border, obviously, because these are going to be peek-through areas. And then that penciled trace is going to help me put this exactly back where I want it on the background. So I'm going to add some glue to the back of the gingerbread house, and then I'm going to set it in, paying attention to where my pencil lines were for the windows, and then that will be looking pretty good for that placement. And now I can bring my book back, and I just need to add some glue to the back of this piece so that I can insert it on the page. And there's just a little bit left to go after that to finish it off. But I really like how it turned out. It just has a very baked look. It's got that nice shimmer of almost like a coating of fine sugar on it, just like you would expect a gingerbread cookie maybe to have. And these cute little figures peeking out, the door opens, just adorable. Now I did need to add a little glue at the bottom there. I had forgotten to do that, so you'll see I just did that one more time. And then I was able to also refold the door a little bit so that it was actually correctly on the score line. And then it's essentially done, but I did decide I wanted to add a sentiment in there, which I did. So it says from our house to yours, and this is from the Christmas sentiment set. And now there's just a little surprise, right? You open up the door and there that little message is. So now I'm going to move on to the next page, and I'm going to start with these 4 figures that I showed you in the beginning of the video. And this again is from the Holiday Mansion set. Now these are pretty small figures, and my eyesight is not the best in the world, so every once in a while you're going to see me pull it off of camera so I can see it a little bit closer and make sure that I'm putting in my lines in the right place. But I am first, like I have done in other pieces, I'm starting with the light colors first. So the whites in this case are his beard, his eyebrows, the brim on his hat, the trim on his suit, and so forth. And it's going to be the C1 is the darker color, just like before, and C0. And I'll just blend that out a little bit on the edges. It's amazing, just adding a little bit like that starts to make these characters come alive. It is quite amazing, always to me. Now I'm bringing back my favorite combo again, R29 and R24, and I'll be outlining his suit with this and doing a little tiny bit of shading. Again, these figures are very small, so really you could color them without any shading at all and it would be perfectly fine. I'm adding just a tish because even for me it's a bit challenging since they're pretty small figures. But any little bit you can add really does help them come to life a little bit. So I'll go ahead and finish his suit up, and then eventually I will be happy with that. And I'm going to put in his face using E00. I do need a couple layers of this because it's not quite enough just once. So you'll see me come back and give it another coating. Then I'm going to use some R20 and put in some cheeks and a little bit on his mouth. And then I'm going to bring in my Pigma pen and just put in his face, so it's just his eyes and his nose. Then the C7, which is a pretty dark gray, I'm adding his boots. And then R29 coming back into the suit and shading it up just a little bit more after I blended it the first time. And he is pretty darn cute. So again, just finishing up a little bit more with the R29 to add a little more depth and dimension, and then doing a little bit of blending with the R24 to follow that up. And you'll see me now add some more C1 and C0, and it's because the red is so bold that the white sort of disappeared, I felt. So it helps to bring out a little more gray and make it contrast a bit more against the red, and that will give it more dimension as well. So again, that's why I went back with more C1 and C0. Now I'm going to start on the little wreath, and to start with I'm going to use my darkest color, the red, because if I cover it with green and then come back with the red, it's going to not be a true red, so it's just better to put that dark red in first. This is the R29, again with the R24, and I, just like before, adding the outline and some shading, then coming back with R24, and then finally after that I will add some more of the detail back in with the R29. Nothing complicated, just pretty simple. Once I get that ready, then I'm going to use the green and fill in, and I will go around the berries as best I can. This color is G21, and it's kind of on the light side of the green, but I was a little fearful making it a dark green. I thought that the green and the red would just be too close together and it would be hard to see the difference between the two colors. I might be wrong about that, but that's the route I took. And then to outline and do a little bit more definition, I use G24. So it's in the kind of the same color family, same tone, it's just that the G24 is a bit darker. And then a second coat of the G21 just to try to get it a bit darker. Well, the one thing about Copics is you can put multiple coats of the same color on, and when you do that it's going to change the color a little bit. It tends to get a bit darker each time you add a new coat. And that's why too, if you use one color and you let it dry and go back again, you can get sometimes a nice shading effect, because the second coat where you're doing shading is just going to be a bit darker than the rest of it. So another thing you can try if you don't have too many markers. And just like with the wreath, I'm going to first put in the reds, and even before that though I added the yellow, because the yellow is again the lightest color and I don't want the yellow to soak up the green or the red, so that goes in first, and then I'm going to go around all that with the green. Same green color combination, G21, and I think it was G24. So I'll go ahead and work on that. really, honestly, the hardest part about this is just being delicate enough not to go over the Christmas tree balls and the garland. Just take your time, and you can always dab. You don't have to, actually stroke when you're working with little things. Dabbing works quite nicely. Now this is a green twin tone that I'm using here. I just decided that it might be better to have a little more definition around the edges than with just my marker tip. And I don't know, it really probably wasn't necessary, but I went ahead and tried that, and it's fine. But you wouldn't have to. I add a little brown to the bottom for the stem of the tree. And now I'm working on the little reindeer head. He's really cute. And I'm using the same E-color family that I used on the gingerbread house. So there's a light tone, a mid-tone, and then the darkest shadow color. And you can see here I'm putting in, the red nose, and I used a lighter color for his collar, a yellow gold for the bells on his collar, and again the darkest brown for his horns there on the top of his head. And he's starting to look a little better. And then I'm going to bring my black pen in to add a little more definition again for his eyes and for his mouth. And he's starting to come around. He's starting to look a bit better. I'm using the R20 for inside of his ears. And I'm also going to put a little bit of darker brown outlining for his face and for his body there. But this is a great example of how it just kind of looks awful at first. And then as you add a little more shading, add a little more depth of color, everything starts to look a lot better. So don't give up if you start coloring and you think, oh, this looks terrible. Because you've seen here that often it looks pretty bad when I start out. But by the time we're done, it really is a nice look for the most part. But these little figures, I will tell you, they are a bit challenging, especially when you're trying to add any kind of shading to them. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, just color them in with one green, one red. Don't mess with all of the different shading. It will look still very nice, and then you can always keep practicing, and eventually you'll get a little more comfortable with adding more than one color in these little tiny pieces. But again, that just comes with experience. You'll eventually get more comfortable with that. All right, so I'm now going to prepare the background of the page I'm working on, and this is where those little figures are going to go. So the frame comes from the die set, and so is this scallop circle, and I cut that out on white and attached the wreath to that just to give it a little more definition. This is like a scroll, and I cut that out of silver cardstock too. I'm going to use that to kind of look like a decorative hanger for this frame. So I've got these on some double-sided foam tape. I'm going to take the backing off and attach them, centering each one in one of those panels. I should point out that I also went around the edges of these, except for Santa, with matching markers to further define them and get rid of that white edge. I thought the Santa was okay with the white edge because it makes it stand out, of course, against the red paper. So that's the reasoning behind the fact that I didn't do it for Santa. Now this is going to glue into the page. And then I'm going to come with that little scroll piece and put it at the top. I just dabbed a little bit of glue in different areas of that tiny little piece, and that's enough to hold it. But that's the whole page right there. I think it's very cute, and especially next to the gingerbread house. It's a nice juxtaposition of the Christmas figures and, you know, just the theme. So now I'm finally on to page 3, and I've made a shaker window for this. I used these square pieces of double-sided foam tape. I cut strips out of those squares, and I also put a piece of acetate on it before I put the double-sided foam tape. Then I'm going to dab some glue just to give me a little bit more stick, and also to give me a little bit of wiggle room when I put my cardstock on top of it. So a few of my pieces that I used inside the shaker got stuck to the edge, so that's why I was taking them out or pushing them back in so that they didn't get stuck there permanently. And then I'm just putting a piece of gold cardstock in the back. So we've got a piece of silver and gold. And then I'm adding the Merry and Bright sentiment. This is from the Christmas sentiment set as well. There are literally so many different sentiments in that set. It was hard for me to pick what to put on this. But in the end, I settled on Merry and Bright. I'm just putting at the top of it in a thin strip so it doesn't get in the way of the shaker pieces. But I think that turned out quite cute. So now you can see the first page, the second page, and the third page that we did today. So I want to thank you for joining me in this third video tutorial of the Christmas journal using Art Impression products. I hope you'll join me again next Friday. We will be doing the next 3 pages, and we are just about halfway done with our book. So it will take about 3 more videos and we'll have it all completed. Have a great week, everyone. I will see you soon, and until then, keep crafting. Bye.